How do I normally start these videos? Look, this is from Overwatch. You probably don't care. Hello. Hi, members. Welcome back to another members video. Today, we're going to be looking at things inside the archive. We're diving into the archive once again. And this time, we're going to be looking at Gelli World, which is now called Lumelria. I'll talk about that at a later time. I don't want to get too sidetracked here. But we're going to be diving into the archive and looking at some sprites and some concept art from Gelli World. And it's going to be pretty cool, so let's just get into it. The first thing, this isn't actually concept art. This was in the game. This is one of the furniture items, and it's this painting, which looks pretty normal at first, but it's actually a reference to Treasure Trove Cove in Banjo-Kazooie. There's a giant lighthouse in that level. I love this level. And I also added the red, yellow, and blue colors for Banjo-Kazooie. So this is a pretty neat little Easter egg. So now if I add this painting back into the game, when the game actually is made, you'll be like, I know exactly what that's a reference to. The next thing is, this is concept art that I drew, yours truly. I know, look at my artwork, pretty beautiful. For what I wanted the cover art, banner, promotional art, whatever you call it, key art for Gelli World to look like. The idea was they're all on the floating islands. The player is holding up a little jelly. There's a leaflup looking up at a tree. There's like a cave island with a waterfall in the background. An Ulalian flying at a balloon. Look at that. The player's house, which I beautifully drew. Just wrote the word house on the inside of it. And then another person running after a bonbon that's carrying a sweet root away from their farm. This was my basic idea. We're going to look at what it actually ended up turning into, which is a lot better than the concept that I drew. This is what it turned into. You have the player looking up out into the horizon at the different islands and at the Gelli World logo. They have their partner jelly by their side. There's a couple of rock potatoes growing. A Pimtelli is looking up at them. You have the destroyed town on the side with Mayor Gilbert waving to the player and his little chickadeet Pepper, as well as the strange character that no one knows standing outside of the cog. And there's other little pieces of the cog on floating islands right there. This island, which has this strange little spring coming out of it, as well as a little balloon holding a present, and then a floating island with a waterfall pouring off the side, with a little leaflup sleeping under a tree. There's also the bonbon carrying a sweet root and running away, and some poppies. This obviously looks a lot better than this, but you can see how a lot of my cool ideas that I had for the concept art before it turns into the real thing actually translated over. I feel like I can come up with some pretty neat ideas for what I want it to look like, but then when I send it over to an artist that actually can draw really well, they're able to compose it in a lot better way than I was able to, and the perspective is just a lot cooler than my completely flat perspective that I did. Speaking of concepts, this is what I drew for my idea for the Gelli World logo. I drew this, and then of course I sent it off to the person that does all the art, Smash Artist, really cool guy. And then Smash came up with this. Looks a lot better than my idea. My idea is largely intact though. I wanted the G to be a jelly, and the I to have some sweet roots on it, and the O to be a world, and then it turned into this, which looks really, really cool. And then later got updated to another one, but just gonna move past that. Onto the ruins concept. This is for the first version of Gelli World, where the art style was a bit different, and this was an area in the game that was going to be the next area that I was going to add. I think the last thing I added was the beach, and then I added the forest, and then I was going to add these caves. And inside the caves, you would get some cool stuff. There were jellies in here, Golem Minis, which, if you've played the Gelli Fields demo, you may recognize Pebbles, the Golem Mini. Got a little bit of a redesign. It used to look not as cute as it looks now. I like the colors, and I like the way that it looks now compared to back then where it looked little bit strange. There was also rubies. They're not going to be called rubies, but that's basically what they are. Right now, you guys are used to mythstone, which is basically like a diamond, and also jolts, which are like an electric stone. I also am going to be adding rubies, and there was a ruby jelly, kind of a cute little fellow wearing a big crown, very cute. There were rubies, and there were ruby shards. The ruby was meant to be a basic early gemstone that you could get. The rubies would be the most common. Jolts would be a lot rarer than that, and obviously mythstone would be like the rarest one that you can get. If we go back to the key art here, there's this destroyed building, and how the game was originally going to work is the town is destroyed, and in order to fix it, you have to get these work boxes. I don't know what you'd call them, toolboxes, and they had different rarities: wood, stone, iron, ruby. And depending on the tier of the workbox, it would determine the tier of the building that you could repair or upgrade. So your house might have needed a wooden toolbox to repair it just to being an actual house, but then the stone one would add an extra room to your house. Guess that makes sense, right? I like the design of these ruins a lot. I like the little weird background things that I did. It's a little bit busy, but in the game it would have been a lot more opened up, so everything wouldn't have been as crammed together as it is here. But I think it looks really cool, so much so that you'll see in a minute that I was inspired by this when I made different ruins for the updated version of Jelly World. There's also a Sunsnap turnip here. Oh my goodness. This is something that you'll see in Lumeria because this sprite is coming back, but this is the entrance to Gemlin Ruins. The Gemlins are mysterious creatures that nobody knows about, and we're actually going to be learning a little bit about them in Jelly Fields and in Leaflup's Candy Hunt and in Lumeria. But the place that you'll learn about them the most is the game that they originally debuted in, Luna Lane, if I ever freaking make that game. Originally in Jelly World, you were supposed to go through these trial chamber type deals that were dungeons, and they were called towers, and this is the grass tower. If you watch the canceled video for Jelly Ventures, I mentioned the grass tower, and now it's come full circle because the grass tower was meant to be in Jelly World, but I was trying to come up with a tile set for it that I liked, and I think I hated this tile set, but now that I've come back to it, I actually really like it. It's a little bit busy. If I were to change it now, I would probably get rid of some of the moss on some of these tiles and make the tiles longer so it's less busy. Especially for these background pieces, it's just like a little bit too much going on all at once. But overall, I think it looks awesome. I think this was me also working on a version of it where the tiles were a little less sparse, so it was a bit less busy. I also took off the grass growing on the sides of the walls. I think it'd be cool if there was grass on some parts of the walls, but not on every part. I also had these little bits of moss like kind of hanging down the tiles. This actually looks really cool. I don't know why I hated this so much. It looks awesome. Here is a cave. I called it Ruins, and it's inspired by the ruins / cave that we talked about earlier, and I think this looks awesome. We have the player in an action pose shooting off a myth shard that's flying at this block walker here. Unsuspecting victim about to be blasted. This poor little fella. And the ground tiles are like spiky. Looks really cool, and there's little bits of stone in there. We have the little shapes in the background as usual. The background was unfinished, so there was just these like little weird ovals that I had drawn, little bits of crystal growing out, some weird plants, a biter jelly, and then some interesting plants growing out of the ground. I put a lot of work into a lot of these sprites, and they're very detailed. When I look back at this stuff, I'm like, dang, how did I draw that? The stuff I draw now is much more simplistic than this. This stuff has detail. Up here we have the player riding on a mousey. I wanted there to be mounts in the game as something that you can upgrade towards. So kind of like in games where you get a horse and then you can ride it, you'd be able to tame not only jellies, but different creatures out in the world. and then you'd be able to use them as mounts, and then they would also have special abilities. Like the Mousie's special ability is it would be able to press a button and it would do like a quick burst of speed. So you could go really fast with this thing. This right here is blacked out because it's spoilers for a part of the game. So I have it covered up. I guess you can come up with your own conclusions of what might be behind this box. All right, the last thing that we're looking at is the actual concept for the ruins for the game. I wanted the game to have an endless randomized ruin system similar to in games like Stardew Valley, where you go down into the caves, then you have to fight through the different levels and go deeper and deeper and deeper. In Gelli World, I wanted it to be a different form of combat where you can either do combat or you can avoid and outmaneuver the different traps in the game. Enemies were called traps, and all of them were powered by this mysterious energy. This trap has green on it, which means the trap is active and it's alive. This one has green on it, it's active and alive. This one has red on it, the trap is turned off, and it has an X above it to show that it's turned off. And these ones have been turned off. The player would unlock different spells that could do different things to help them in the dungeons. For example, this spell was like a big AoE blast that would turn off all of the traps in an area around you. These are little spiky boys, and the player has gone pow, and now the spiky boys are turned off, so the spikes are gone. This was an attack that you could shoot out and it would hit things, but it had a special effect on it where if this little arrow launcher shoots out an arrow and this thing hit it, it would then make the arrow fly back into the arrow launcher and then turn it off. And there was also this little fella here that would shoot projectiles in an arc, similar to that enemy thing in Super Mario World that just like spit stuff up into the air. You know what I'm talking about if you played that game. But there would be a bunch of different traps, and you would be able to take them head on and fight them with your attacks to make them turn off, or you'd be able to outsmart and outmaneuver them if you want to play the game that way. But that was my idea for the dungeon. I still want to do that in Lumeria. It's such a cool idea, and I had thought out so much of it, but I never ended up actually getting around to doing it before the project got destroyed and obliterated. Okay, that was me digging into the archive for Gelli World. I could dig into the archive for this game plenty of times, so let me know if you want me to do that again. I will see you guys next week for Members Fairly Friday. Next week, we are going to be looking into my various sketchbooks. Oh, this thing is dusty. We're gonna have to dust this thing off. We're gonna look at some of my sketches and some of my ideas for this. I can make a whole series out of that, but I'll see you guys next week on Friday. Bye bye.